Hi everyone, I'm going to apologize in advance for my voice. It's almost gone by now, so I hope you will be able to understand what I'm saying. Today I'm presenting a research that we did together with Donika as part of a research in the institution where we work at Space Syntax. I am Gresa, my background is in architecture and urban planning, with specialization in geo-information science and Earth observation. Quite a long title. Currently I do spatial analysis and I lead an NGO here in Kosovo. With the changes that we're seeing in our cities, as they change, they also keep facing everybody with more and more problems, of which sorry, of which very important, but we're recording, so yeah. As we see changes, we're also seeing more and more problems, of which we identified safety being one of the biggest problems with which we're trying to work. Our aim in this research and also what we do in the NGO is to try and make use of public spaces as more as we can, and to do that we are set on assessing, on researching a framework that would assess safety in public spaces for different user groups, focusing always on more marginalized groups. And our main focus is to make safe public spaces for women. Through this research, we're using an index-based evaluation system by combining different indicators that are either physical aspects of a public space or perceived safety of users of a public space. As I said, we're doing all of this because we do believe that the use of public spaces should not be evaluated as it's currently being, at least in Kosovo, but also further as a space that provides physical aspects and allows you to use it. We are more focusing on the aspect that if public space could be perceived as not safe subjectively, then there is no use of it, or you could easily say that it is not safe even though it can have the physical aspect regulated. In this aspect, for us, gender plays a very specific role in determining this feeling of security or insecurity in a public space. And as I said, with the SafoMeter framework, we are trying to ensure that we capture the women's perspective in a public space and in evaluating how safe a public space might be or not. The framework of our study, of our methodology, it's being built into mediating indicators that assess both objective safety and look into the physical aspect of a public space, and also feeling and perception as a subjective safety indicator. In this, all the data being collected and analyzed, it is gender disaggregated, so we are taking into consideration the gender of the user or the surveyed person in this case, always into analyzing this. Into the objective indicators, we're looking into 4 indicators: the public lighting as urban fabric of the public spaces, cameras in public spaces, proximity to public institution, and the presence of stray dogs in public spaces. In Kosovo, we do have a big problem with stray dogs, so the indicators are quite location specific for the case of Kosovo, especially Prishtina, and should be looked more carefully in using the framework in another location maybe. While for the subjective indicators, we're looking into perceptions and we're looking into harassment or perceived harassment, fear of harassment in public spaces, theft, perception of diversity in a public space, and also the fear from physical threats of a public space. To go more into each indicator, what we're looking, because we are creating an index to evaluate a public space, we're looking at their impact on what their impact would be in the whole index. The presence of lighting or lighting poles in a public space are, of course, taken as a positive indicator for the index. We assume that a public space that has more lighting makes people feel safer. The presence of cameras that are directed at public spaces, even though some people might argue about the data privacy and the ethics of it. For the case of Prishtina, for the case of Kosovo, we are taking the presence of cameras that are directed to public spaces as a positive indicator for the index. Since lately in Kosovo, in the last years, we've had a lot of cases of harassment in public spaces and other things, and cameras have been the only way to the only evidence in order to solve some cases, be that public cameras in public spaces or private cameras. The presence or the proximity to public institution is also considered as a positive indicator for the index, considering that these institutions, these buildings in Kosovo are usually well secured. There's usually guards around them, there's lighting, and in case of an emergency they seem approachable in different times of the day. And as I mentioned, stray dogs is a very big problem in Kosovo, especially these last 3 to 4 years, and especially in Prishtina. They are part of our streets, our public spaces, sometimes in quite big amount of numbers, up to 20 in a small public space. And they can be aggressive. We've had a lot of cases of aggressions. So in this regard, the stray dogs as an indicator is adapted as a negative impact on the index later on. Yeah, when looking at the subjective indicators, perception of harassment, of course, it is considered as a negative indicator for the index, seeing that fear of harassment might stop somebody from wanting to use a public space, as is perception and fear of the risk of being a victim in a public space, and also physical threats are seen as a negative indicator that would negatively impact the index. On the opposite, diversity and the sense of a person being included in a public space having a variety of users is taken into the index as a positive indicator. All these indicators are compiled into an index that rates a public space from 0 to 10, with 10 being the safest, and of course on the opposite, 0 being least safe public space to be used. In this regard, when calculating the index, both objective indicators and subjective indicators take the same weight, with which we are trying to see if giving an equal importance to both the physical aspect but also the perception of people can bring up a change and would help in making better place-based but also user-based policies to improve the condition of the public spaces. The data, so the framework is first tested in Prishtina, in the urban area of Prishtina. As you might know, Prishtina is the capital city of Kosovo. It counts of around 300,000 inhabitants, of which 80% are living in the urban area. Since it's the capital city, it has a very heterogeneous type of planning and users and everything. It has different things going on culturally and politically and everything, which makes it a very good case study for us to analyze and assess how safe its public spaces are. The data collected for the research was done into two phases and two approaches of data collection. We collected data on field for the physical elements of public spaces, and then separately we did a survey with users of public spaces for the subjective perceptions. The data was collected for a period of 3 months. That was how much it took us to cover the urban area of Prishtina. It was done last year on 2022 from July, August and September. And we used merging maps in mobile phones to collect data on field and later analyzed it in quantum GIS. All data for the 8 indicators was collected as point, and then later on the index was calculated for a hexagonal grid. We analyzed the neighborhoods of Prishtina and tried to set a needed hexagon that would cover at least one neighborhood that has at least one public space in it. And that ended up being a 100-meter distance hexagon, so that we can have at least one public space analyzed to see within the neighborhood how safe a neighborhood can be based on that. To calculate the indicator, we first classified, as I previously mentioned, the indicators as positive or negative impact on the index. Later on, they were normalized and calculated with a corresponding formula for positive or negative indicator. Equal weight was given to the indicators, and they were clustered into the final index. Looking at the results, this map presents the presence of lights in the whole urban area of Prishtina. In yellow, you can see working functional lights in Prishtina, while in dark gray, very blur, you can see the non-functional lights. Prishtina is pretty well covered with lighting, at least the urban area, but as you can see, there are quite some clusters in some neighborhoods where lighting doesn't work. Prishtina has had this problem for almost 2 years. It is a political problem, bureaucratic, contractual problem, and it's allowing some neighborhoods to be fully in the dark for almost 2 years now. A hotspot of missing lightening is especially, you're not going to be able to see here maybe, but this, and that's the stadium of Prishtina, and other things, not very good things happened there. So the lack of lightening just makes it more and more unsafe area. But basically throughout a whole Prishtina, around 1/4 of lightening poles are not working for almost 2 years now. Looking at the presence of cameras, I apologize for my color choice in presentation it looks worse than it should. There are around more than 7,000 cameras only in the urban area of Pristina, of which above 90% are privately owned. As I said, it is good to have public surveillance for some cases, but in the case of Pristina, even though priorly we were considering cameras to be a positive indicator in helping us evaluate safety and feel safer, but seeing that around 90% of the cameras in Pristina are privately owned, it's making us question our own methodology. Either way, there is access to all these cameras. Police has access to the cameras, and they can be used if needed. The institutions and presence of institutions, so proximity to them to make a public space safer. We counted of 25 institutions in urban area of Pristina, and they are very clustered in the center only, so it is playing a almost non-existent role in the overall index. While for the presence of dogs, you can see that they are spread out in almost every area of Pristina. In lighter pink, which you cannot differentiate here, it is where one dog only was found, while in darker pink, which is what you can see, it's where more than 2 dogs were found at that time. With dogs, they move, but mostly they stay in the same place. So yeah, that's coming limitation. I'm hurrying because of time. For harassments, you can see that they're spread out, and in most areas that we surveyed users, they ended up having a perception of possible harassment happening in the public spaces. And out of all the data that we collected, women asked, they always answered yes in feeling fear of harassment, and the harasser was always a man, perceived by them. Also, for the question of perception of theft and fear of theft in public spaces, we were surprised to see that even the main parts, the main areas in the city of Pristina are perceived as areas that theft can happen. While for diversity, we had quite some mixed answers, and like public squares and parks were, as expected, perceived as very diverse. While for physical threats, also what corresponded with physical aspects, people fear of physical threats in more used areas, like some public squares in Pristina, and it comes as a reason, it's always the infrastructure of the square. Looking at the overall index and the overall results, the highest value that we assessed, so the highest results that we got was 5.57 out of 10, meaning that all the assessed areas in Pristina, so all the urban area of Pristina, scores very low on our safety index, and even the areas that are scoring higher, which is still in the middle, they are very spread out and not clustered, and there's no kind of continuation, so there's not even a street from beginning to the end that is being evaluated as a safe area based on the index. In conclusion, SafoMeter, it is an initiative that could assess safety in public spaces by mixing both objective and subjective indicators. The results were assessed in Pristina, and they indicate that there is a very low safety rating for the urban area of Pristina. The SafoMeter survey in Pristina resulted with women respondents feeling always threatened in public spaces, and the majority of them responded that men are the potential portrayers of harassment, and that highlighted the gender nature of public space uses. Collecting spatial data and analyzing spatial data was crucial in assessing safety in public spaces and will help for better interventions, place-based policy making, yeah, I'm going to go faster. I know I have. We did account for some limitations, which we're trying to improve on further research we're doing. The data collected was just collected for a short period of time, for 3 months, and in cases like lightning or something, they improve, and it's a very dynamic indicator, so we need to be capturing data continuously. The hexagonal grid, it represents a typical neighborhood of Pristina, but at the same time, the neighborhoods in Pristina are very heterogeneous because it's a very dense city. Indicators like stray dogs also need more further research, considering the nature of the indicator, and because we were surveying in public spaces, we had a limitation that we couldn't survey individuals under 18 because of we would need parental consent, yes, to do that in Kosovo, and for us a very important target group to look into safety would be the age 10 to 18, so we couldn't do this in the first part. Next, we are, like this is apart from the research, but we're working next on to solve the limitation, is that we're building an online platform that presents all the data collected, but also has the possibility of people reporting. So we're going into crowdfunding of data to have that continuation of data collection, and also be able to get data from individuals under 18. Thank you, and I'm open to questions.